Item 12. One motion has been submitted in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 12. Councillor Charlton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the motion on page 141 of the Council summons.
I second.
Councillor Charlton, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The independent review of children's social care headed by Josh McAllister, published in May 2022, stated, many care-experienced young people face discrimination, stigma and prejudice in their day-to-day lives. Public perceptions of care experience centre on the idea that children are irredeemably damaged, and that can lead to discrimination and assumptions being made. Care-experienced people often face barriers and discrimination and stigma across housing, health, education, relationships, employment and in the criminal justice system. In this motion, I've requested that as a council, we continue to proactively seek out and listen to the views of our care-experienced people when developing new policies and strategies. As a council, we can do this through listening to the voice of the child. So when we use the term voice of the child, we refer to the many ways that children and young people communicate with us, including both verbal and non-verbal communication. Capturing the voice of the child is more than simply seeking their views. It's about enabling them to take an active role in any decision-making concerning them and their future. So prior to the meeting today, I met with Charlie, one of our care-experienced young people. She was hoping to be here this evening, but unfortunately she had other commitments, so she couldn't attend. However, her PA, Sue, is in the chamber, and she's going to make sure that I convey the message that Charlie has given me loud and clear to everyone. So when I met with Charlie, I showed her the motion that was being presented here this evening, and I asked her what her views were as a care-experienced young person and what she felt that growing up in care, the impact that that had on her. So the following are Charlie's words that I'm speaking on behalf of her. My family had been known to the local authorities since before I was even born. I was taken into care in 2016 on an interim care order, as professionals were worried about my parents' substance misuse and antisocial behaviour. Two of my siblings were adopted, and I miss them dearly, but I do get to write to them twice a year, which is good, and I know they are doing okay. My mum sadly lost one of my siblings recently, as he was prematurely stillborn, and my dad has recently had a child placed in care in another local authority. I asked to be assessed to be their carer, but my viability assessment was negative due to how close I was to my parents. They are my parents, though, and I will care for them and support them no matter what. But my own kids come first, and I will do anything to keep them safe. At school, I felt like I was separated out from others. It was like we would be bad because we were in care. And I felt really singled out, like we were bad kids because we were looked after. It's our parents that are the problem, not us. Yes, we might not be angels all the time, but would you be? Your whole world and everything you have ever known has all been changed overnight. Charlie is a mum of 2 children, aged 1 and 2. Charlie's first child was open on a child in need basis due to historical concerns with Charlie's behaviour and concerns around baby's dad. This was due to end as Charlie was winning at parenting. When Charlie informed the midwife of her second pregnancy, her PA was contacted with regards to a pre-birth referral due to P being known to services and Charlie's care experience. Charlie's PA advocated for Charlie in this instance, as this was certainly not required, as there were absolutely no concerns regarding Charlie's ability to parent. Being care experienced shouldn't mean that your baby is assessed before it's even born. Just because my parents were crap doesn't mean that I will be too. And that's verbatim. Charlie wrote that. I haven't changed anything. That's just what she said. So it makes me feel really emotional, because that's how some of our young people are feeling. So I want to share thank Charlie for sharing her experience, because that's not an easy thing to do, and that will have stoked up a lot of emotions within her talking about that. But Charlie's words are just one example where one of our care experienced young people has encountered discrimination, stigma and prejudice in her day-to-day life. Unfortunately, Charlie's experience of facing unfair judgments about her ability to parent when she had her own children was identified as one of the issues in Josh McAllister's review. Having spoken to other parents who have care experience, they talk about routine questions being asked about their care status at midwifery appointments. And on one occasion, a referral was put through to our social care just because the young person was care experienced. I'm pleased to let everyone know in the chamber that there were no identified issues and mum and baby are doing really well. This week, some of my colleagues in the chamber had the pleasure of joining me at the Corporate Parenting Forum and heard from some of our children and young people about their thoughts on being care experienced. They talked again about the stigma of being labelled and everyone knowing that you were in care. One example a young person gave was being at school and being told in front of his peers that their carer was waiting at reception to take them to the dentist. Other young people talk about having to follow a process if they want a sleepover at a friend's, which include a social worker being contacted, a risk assessment being carried out, all for a sleepover, and it takes time for that to happen. And a lot of the time, by the time the young people have got the nod, they can't go because it's too late. So young people talk about not being treated as normal, in their words. They felt that people made assumptions about them and their birth families, and they did not feel that adults had the same expectations of them as other children. This again is an all too familiar theme. In my conversations with children looked after and care leavers, I repeatedly hear them talk of being treated differently and singled out due to their care status. I hope that people will support this motion, but before I end, I just want to share some words that were in the Josh McAllister review. The disadvantage faced by our care experienced community should be the civil rights issue of our time. Children in care are powerless. They're often invisible to society and face some of the greatest inequalities that exist in England today. It is truly inspiring that in spite of these injustices, so many care experienced people go on to run businesses, start families, earn doctorates, produce dramas, write poetry, become government ministers and change the world in countless ways. They are a community to be nurtured, understood and celebrated. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. And before I bring in other speakers, can I just ask you to pass on our thanks as well to Charlie for her contribution. Thank you. Right, any other speakers? Tricia, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This motion is about a step towards ensuring lifelong parenting for those with care experience, which the majority of those without care experience often receive from their birth parents. It's also about how everyone who has a role in the lives of those in care or those who have experienced care can help to make up the often huge disadvantage that this group of people sadly begin life with. Disadvantage that leads to discrimination based on often ignorant and cruel stereotyping that people with care experience endure throughout their lives, and which can lead to worse, sometimes much worse, life outcomes for them as opposed to their peers without care experience. This is at the heart of the inequality experienced by this group of people, and which is why making care experience a protected characteristic is so important. There can be no argument that many care experienced people are resilient and go on to do amazing things with their lives, like many of our children here in St Helens. Also Terry Galloway, who grew up in care in Salford and who's initiated this fantastic campaign for equal opportunities for people with care experience. However, Mr Galloway talks about two chilling statistics. One is that in England, over half of all the people in prison or in custody who are under 21 years of age have come from the care system, and that for people aged 21 or older, the proportion is much higher. Secondly, 70% of those care experienced people are also likely to die early because of the trauma they've been through in their lives. These figures bring home hard the terrible and utterly unacceptable inequality and disadvantage experienced by this group of people. Sitting on adoption and foster panels, I regularly read about the damage children going to care have experienced. The harm often starts before those children are even born, through alcohol and substance use in pregnancy, which can cause lifelong physical and cognitive damage to those children once born, then through domestic violence and through the many ugly faces of neglect. Thankfully, as only today, I also see truly amazing people coming forward, offering love, support and nurture to try to bridge that terrible gap and bring these children on, alongside, of course, the dedicated and hard-working staff in children's services. And thank you so much to our own staff here in St Helens for the wonderful work they do, which has recently been recognised by Ofsted and others. However, this motion will also make a new and really good contribution to improving the lives of people with care experience in our borough. What it means is that everyone who has a responsibility for helping those with care experience should understand and recognise the disadvantages the disadvantages and inequalities care experienced people start life with and their consequent needs. Proactively and sensitively seek and listen to the views of care experienced people, act on their feedback, and then shape services, be they education, council, health or housing, and also employment opportunities, to make sure they work as well for those with care experience, as well as they do for those without care experience. Of course, there is no extra money to help with this initiative. The government's own Josh McAllister, author of this report, if you remember, identified 2.6 billion was needed for children's services, with the government allocating far, far less. But this change, making care experience a protected characteristic here, will make a difference to the lives of care experienced people in St Helens, resulting in better life chances and better life outcomes, which, like everyone else, they have a right to expect. Thank you, Nova, for bringing this motion to Council and for articulating Charlie's words. And I hope everyone in this chamber gives it full support. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Ostendecker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And also, first of all, I would like to start with thanking Nova for bringing this motion to Council. I think I was very touched when she shared these words from the things that Charlie said, where she said something like, care experienced young people feel invisible to society. I mean, that's really, really heartbreaking. Dear colleagues, I stand firmly in support of this motion. This motion calls upon the government to provide even greater support for our care experienced people. I want to take a moment to commend our council for the remarkable Ofsted grade that we achieved recently as regards our care leavers. This is a testament to our support for these young lives. Our ILAC Ofsted report stated that young people not only receive help when they need it, including essential emotional well-being support, but they also have PAs who truly understand their vulnerabilities. These PAs recognize the impact of the adverse life experiences on the health and well-being of our care experienced youths, and they actively encourage them to access support services that is very tailored to their unique needs. Despite our recent achievements, I'm very heartened to see that we remain steadfast in our commitment to care experienced young people, not only through our words, but also through our actions as well. I'd like to share a story with you all that I think underscores the importance of this motion. Midfay, a 17-year-old care experienced young lady that is very, very full of potential, like many other young people. So she went for a job interview, and this is a true story that is that is actually in the public domain. And so this interview was actually proceeding positively until Faye mentioned that she lived in care when the question was asked about her family. So as soon as she mentioned that she lived in care, it was as though a chill descended upon the room, freezing any further engagement. And it came as no surprise to Faye when she later learned that day that she didn't get the job. This is where positive action comes into play, a tool that can empower specific groups or individuals with protected characteristics to unlock their full potential. While the ACRES website lists examples of these characteristics, care experience is yet to be included as a protected junior characteristics. So in my opinion, this motion is a crucial step towards joining other local authorities in recognizing that care experience should be a protected characteristic. Just imagine this scenario. An employer notices that none of their staff have any care experience background. In a bold move, they can decide to launch a program that is aimed at boosting the confidence of care experienced young people to apply for top managerial positions. Their goal is simple, mainly to correct the imbalance and make their organizations more representative of our general society. This initiative is an example of how action this initiative is an example of how positive action that an employer can demonstrate that care experienced people are truly underrepresented in our workforce. Finally, please allow me to introduce you to another young lady from my ward. She embarked on an apprenticeship journey with the Housing Association, and her work ethic shone so brightly that the company chose to retain her. This is the kind of success story that we can nurture when we elevate our commitment to supporting our care experienced young people. They will flourish in stable jobs, also contributing to stronger community and a brighter future. With this in mind, colleagues, I urge each and every one of you to please throw your support behind this important motion. I believe that together we can ensure that our care experienced young people have every opportunity to thrive and to succeed in life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Nova, for bringing this motion. It's saddening in one way that we do have to do this, because the reality is, and many of us who have, sat on children's services, and myself since 2018, and have sat in planning committees, unfortunately, when there's been applications made for children's homes. The reality is that our young people are set at a disadvantage, and the problem is not them, it's us. It's us as adults who put them barriers before them. And for the last committee meeting, I was actually nearly in tears for the first time since 2018 to hear that we'd got outstanding for our children leaving care. It was one of the happiest committees that I've ever sat on, and it has been a long time coming, and a lot of hard work by such brilliant, dedicated social workers, teams, managers, our portfolio holder. I was fortunate enough my first year that Nova chaired Children's Committee, and her passion has clearly had a positive impact as well. And Councillor Long as well, she's identified some really pertinent areas that we've needed to look at that has helped that journey on its way. But 2015 was when I decided or looked to come on council because of this very issue, because of what was happening. And it wasn't anything to do with this council. It was the neglect that was happening within communities. It was children coming through and then ended up in the criminal justice system. And these are traumatised young people. Often they are the victims, and we as a society don't see that. We see them as the problem. We don't look at We are looking at the effects and not the cause. So yeah, they might act out, they may be problematic, but you know what? Most of our children are, you know, and they have parents, they have 2 parents. So for a child to have to be a care leaver as a protected characteristic, it saddens me, but it heartens me as well, because it means that we're going in the right direction and that we do recognise that these children, you know, can be our leaders. Some of them already are. Some of them are in Parliament. Some of them are running businesses. Some of them are in this chamber. You know, some of them, you know, have just got first-class degrees, despite going in through the care system. So I always used to say, if a child is going to be removed from a family, you better hope that you're going to do a better job than that family did. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, for the first time, we are doing that. We, as an authority, are doing that. And that is led by a Labour party. And I couldn't be more proud. But more than that, it means that our children really, really do have a chance. And them statistics of being in prison and, you know, becoming future victims, they're going to reduce. And if we carry on the way that we're going, they have as good a chance, if not better, than the children who are brought up in, you know, so-called ideal families. But I want to give my thanks to everybody who's been involved in this journey. It's not been easy, and it's cost not just financial, but it's cost a lot of people a lot, and I couldn't be more prouder. So thank you, and thank you to the authority and to everybody who works within children's services.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking in support of this motion and would like to thank Councillor Charlton for bringing it forward. Many good points have already been made, and I'm sure more will be. But I want to speak on one specific area where discrimination, assumptions and prejudice are laid bare for all to see, and that is within the planning process. Colleagues who sit on the planning committee have heard much of this before, but tonight's motion allows me to make those points in a wider context. The planning process is, of course, in place to make decisions on planning matters and planning matters alone, but I am firmly of the view that the planning process is an inappropriate mechanism for which to determine the location of homes for children in care. Why? Because, in part because it allows prejudice and assumptions about those in care to rise to the surface, and we, as the planning authority, then publish and share those prejudices because that is what the process requires. The vast majority of children in care are victims of abuse or neglect, have experienced family breakdown or disability or additional mental health needs. In short, they are vulnerable and need care. Yet, we go on to advertise the location of their potential future homes. We encourage people to comment and then share those comments with everyone to see, including those who have experienced the care system. Just to take the last 2 applications heard by the Planning Committee and taken from those reports, here is what some people in our community felt they could say about children in care, children we are responsible for. They will devalue my home. They will increase crime. They will be noisy. Their living here will increase the likelihood of car fires. They will cause ASB to rise. They will put other children at risk. They will be a burden on local services. We do not want those type of people here. I am not saying there shouldn't be a process, far from it. I believe there should be a way of determining the location and indeed the suitability of care homes and providers. It's just that planning, in my view, is not the way to do it. And government sort of agrees. Through ministerial statements and planning guidance, it's made clear that the planning process should not be used as a barrier to providing homes for the most vulnerable children in our and other communities. Yet it is still the process that we must go through, helping to perpetuate the stigma and barriers that those in the care system face. And I feel it isn't equitable with other homes for other groups of people. A house can be bought for up to 6 residents to live in, all requiring 24-hour care and support, with all that entails in terms of staffing as well as visits and behaviour of families and relatives. Yet no planning application is required. And even if a lawful development certificate is required, I don't believe there is a requirement to consult with neighbours or others. Unlike the provision of a care home for children, where even if there are less residents and staff, Because the staff live in, planning is required. To emphasise the point, where a property is bought in the borough to provide with support a home for several ex-offenders, including someone convicted of child neglect, to assist in their rehabilitation, no planning permission is required. I don't necessarily have an issue with that, but to house the victims of that neglect in the borough with support in a property for that reason does require planning permission. How are the above two examples right or equitable? Our officers handle these cases well, fairly and within the planning rules and guidance. But for relatively small children's care homes, which create settings little different to the ordinary family home in composition, structure and impact, to be required to go through the planning process achieves little or nothing beyond compounding prejudices and assumptions about those in care. It gives residents a false impression that the planning process can stop vulnerable children being housed near them when the guidance clearly states it cannot. It heightens concerns and tensions and places us as an elected representatives of communities with a responsibility for their vulnerable children in an interesting position. Do we be honest with people, or do we, if this motion passes, support residents in using what I believe to be a flawed process to try and prevent people with what we will consider to be a protected characteristic from living near them? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Councillor Macaulay.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. First of all, as a ward colleague of Councillor Charlton, I know she lives and breathes this and has done for a number of years she's been on council. So I'd like to offer congratulations both to Northern the work she's done and everybody that's been on that journey. From the Chief Executive, the officers, and especially all the social workers, members, it's been on scrutiny panel. Everybody has done an outstanding job. So that's my first comment. My second one, totally support what Councillor Bowden has just said. I was going to make a bit of a point, maybe not in much detail, but it is totally the wrong process to go through the planning. Myself personally, I would do more or less anything for my kids, my grandkids. And I'm sure most of you are exactly the same. But these are our kids. So as corporate parents, we should be doing everything we can for these kids. And when it comes to planning applications, I have been on planning committee when members have said some of the things that's been, and we have got to look at ourselves, and we have got to, when we're challenged by the public, we've got to go back. We have got to respond back, exactly as Andy's just mentioned. We're working a lot better now as a council with our housing officers, regeneration officers, in helping children who are coming out of care. And I want to focus a little bit on that. I want to give a commitment that any child in care or somebody coming out of care will get a guaranteed interview if they apply for any of the upcoming jobs or the regeneration projects we're doing on the council, the council-led. It's the least I think we can do as corporate parents, yeah, and supporting that. And please get that message out if you know people in care and that. We're certainly doing that. Our Ways to Work team, yeah, will also help people into jobs outside of and make them a case in point where they go out and do that extra hard for them. If you had a company business, yeah, you'd do everything you could to get your kids in sorted. Let's do the same. Look at this as the family firm, and let's help those kids coming out of care into employment and sustainable living and housing. And we all know we're living through a housing crisis at the moment, yeah. And you'll get the same things of me, people not being able to get into social or affordable housing. Well, we as a council look at them as a priority. When people say to you about these things, please, please, please reaffirm to people that they are a priority and why they're a priority. Yeah, I think let's go through. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Massell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank Councillor Charlton for bringing this motion forward. I think it's essential that we have protected status for these children. I wanted to make a couple of points. Honest to Councillor Bowden's remarks, if a resident came to me and said that they wanted me to support objections to a children's home being built in my ward, they would go with a flea in their ear, because I just would not support that stance. I'm all for children being in family accommodation, and I think it's a way forward. But the point I wanted to make was, when I read this, I thought about children leaving care. Last Thursday, I got a phone call, "Mum, can you come down and babysit? Because we've both got parents' evenings. Can you pick the girls up from school?" Of course, I'm a granny. Of course I went. 300 miles there and back. But I did it. I came back on Monday, and on Tuesday I got, "Mum, can you have the baby for a few hours?" Those few hours lasted from 9:15 till 7 o'clock at night. I didn't mind, because I love having him, even though he's hard work. And this is one of the things that worries me about care leavers. They haven't got the family support when they come out of care. They haven't got a granny who they can turn to and ask for advice, or a mum who they can say, "What should I do about this?" or "Can you babysit while I do a few hours at college?" And when we talked about this on some task and finish group, it was suggested that we had an adopt a granny process, which I thought was really quite nice, where people who are coming out of care, when they've turned 16, they've got somebody to turn to who will help them look after the children, or just give them a word of advice or a word of caution. So I think that we've probably got to look at it wider, and how can we support people to get into society when they come out of care. We do our best for them whilst we're caring for them, but life goes on after, and they often haven't got the family support. I was also thinking, the 1st of September, my eldest grandson turned 18. Come to the pub, Mum, while we have a celebration, and the whole family was there. If you come out of care, you haven't got that family network to come and help you celebrate something as nice as an 18th birthday. I'm pleased to say he bought me a pint, and he was asked for his ID at the bar, which was great. But it's, how do we get beyond coming out of care? We support them whilst they're in care, but how do we support them when they come out of care is the point I wanted to make. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Greaves next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Nova. I won't go on too much, because obviously everything that really I would like to say has been said by Trish and by Nova, but we will wholeheartedly be supporting this motion. And I won't repeat everything, but it may seem, when you first look at the motion, a little bit extreme to put care leavers in as a protected characteristic, but it is absolutely needed now more than ever. 14 years ago, most of you know, I became a foster carer, and I was appalled by friends and neighbours that asked me, was I not scared? Scared of what? A child who is vulnerable, frightened and traumatised. I had neighbours and friends that didn't want their children to mix with my children for fear that my children would turn their children. I just could not comprehend this at all. It also went right the way across into activity clubs, so that's also there, football clubs, boxing, even education. I lost friends, absolutely no loss there, but 14 years ago we experienced bias and prejudice from schools as well. So even where schools were concerned, I've had to advocate for 14 years, and that's just one person for the children that have come under my care. There are fellow professionals. Nova hit the nail absolutely on the head. I have had first-hand experience of going in as a supportive person that's for somebody that's no longer in care, and they're fighting to keep their children for no other reason that they went through the care system themselves, and therefore they must be poor parents. And that absolutely gets me to the bone. It really does. The prejudice and the bias is still very much evident, and it appalls me, and it still does. As I packed my bag today, I noticed that in my bag I've got some of my work badges, you know, hidden disabilities, ADHD for the children that I work with. And it struck me that we do need protected characteristics, because our care leavers are people that are also subject to that type of bias and prejudice. We wouldn't dare have those same attitudes that we used to have towards people with ADHD or ODD or autism, because we're now aware of those protected characteristics, and we're learning to embrace it. Until we understand the stigma and the bias and the prejudice that our care leavers also experience, we will not make change. And those old preconceived views held by employers still, friends, neighbours and other agencies and organisations about care leavers will continue, and they will continue to be disadvantaged just because in their early life family and home broke down. Some of our care leavers are the most resilient people I have ever met because of their early life experiences, and we talk about this all the time when we're in scrutiny, when we talk about how our care leavers and how our foster children and our children residential and how they shouldn't have barriers towards education and they should have the same aspirations as any other child in this borough, but somehow we look down and we say, well, you know, they won't have that because of this, and there shouldn't be a barrier just because you've gone through the care system. So absolutely, Nova, we will wholeheartedly be supporting this motion, and thank you so much for bringing it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and be brief. Fully support the motion and pass on the congratulations to the Department for achieving the report that they did. One of the problems within the care system, it's an old one, is that leaving care. I was at a meeting when I first got to the council, we talked about the children's homes. We did have, I think, 4 in the borough at one time, and we closed them because we tried to move people towards foster care rather than the children's homes. They didn't work in the essence, they didn't give a family environment. I was given assurances that it's not going to be the same, that can be different. And hopefully it will be with the emphasis that the department's now putting on it. One of the areas where we had some concerns many years ago was leaving care. Children came to that age where they left care. And we found out that they were on the last ladder for getting a home, a house. A lot of them ended up in places which were not conducive to good living. I'll not name the places, but it's on North Road. Well, somebody said once, if you didn't do drugs before you went in there, you did it when you come out. And it's still a problem nowadays. One of the other areas which we moved towards them was giving them priority in housing. But just remember, these children have not had the family experience that most of us have had in terms of how to, do anything. And some of the children went into bedsits, into flats, whatever, no cooking facilities, to spending all the benefits that they got on takeaway meals. One of the other areas which was concerning to me at the time, and we tried to resolve it, was that these are very vulnerable children. They used to guarantee that they attracted people who would try and take advantage of that. And it used to turn up on the day the children got their benefits and took them off them. They were that vulnerable, and we tried to resolve that issue. But the only word of caution is that what we need to do, we've tried for years. I mean, I've seen the adverts, and I've no doubt the council, this council has tried to get more foster carers. But there is that big bias. Going back to Councillor Bolden's point, I do remember an application coming in many years ago. I think it was something in Haydock or Blackbrook. It actually didn't need the planning permission for the children to be there. It's because of an extension to house them. And one of the objectors said, and this sickened me at the time, I work in the care sector, I know what these children are like. We don't want them round here. And that really did sicken me. And it's that bias and prejudice we've got to try and get over. And again, it's taking Councillor's point in regards to job interviews. I think we did at the time say, well, we would interview those to try and get them into the council as employees, give them the opportunities. It's very difficult now with government cuts to do any of that sort of thing. Well, I fully support the motion, I fully support the department in all to do to protect our most vulnerable children.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Gomez-Aspron.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. if you make sweeping statements about any demographic, you are ignorant, whether that be the travelling community, referring to the unemployed as idle, asylum seekers, kids in care. And I'm proud that the motions that we've brought over these last couple of months to protect and promote those most vulnerable characteristics have come from the Labour group every time. And it's fine sitting there and not speaking and voting in favour or abstaining or doing whatever you're going to do. But it's that ignorance that was referred to in the speech from Charlie that Nova made before. We are representatives. We are not delegates. You don't come here representing the views of the person that moaned the loudest. Because if you follow that through to conclusion, if a racist group moaned the loudest, you would not then come and advocate a racist view. And it was really welcoming. I have no reason to doubt what Councillor Marcel said. I've never been on planning with her, but I know when those type of applications come to committee, I can rely on, firstly, our Labour group, but credit where it's due, Jeff Pearl, to call it out when that bigotry is shown at those committees. And he will, and we look at each other, itching which one's going to speak first and call it out, because I know that you will. And it's refreshing, because people should do that. It's not easy. It doesn't pander to the crowd that are shouting at you, but it's the right thing to do based on the reasons that we're elected. And if the public don't like that, they can get rid of us, rather than us change our views to do the wrong thing. Going forward, this council spends north of 30 million quid a year looking after children. It's one of the single biggest budget lines in the budget book. And ideally, you wouldn't want to look after any, because it means they wouldn't have been failed by the system. But whatever has gone wrong, it is never the kids' fault. And so as representatives and not delegates, we represent those kids that live in this borough in our ward, as well as corporate parents, in forums like planning committee meetings. And Richard and Andy hit the nail on the head. And the really frustrating bit is, the quotes that Andy made, you could point to some of the members in this room that made them. And that is it's sickening, it's woeful, it's embarrassing at committee, and it needs to be called out. I welcome Councillor Greaves' comments. I would hope that she speaks to ward members about that, based on previous comments in planning committee meetings, based on care homes proposed in Rainhill, not from Councillor Greaves, but from her ward colleagues. To imply that they're anything other than normal, like Charlie mentioned in a speech, is ridiculous. I remember an article recently that it was one of the members of the right-wing press referring to a school as woke because they'd sent a letter out that said parent or guardian rather than parents. I mean, they did that when I was at school 30 years ago. It's not new, it's not innovative, it's inclusive, that's the point. And if being sympathetic and inclusive is woke, then I'll be woke. I don't really care whether you call it me or not, it's fine. Kids are kids and deserve a chance. And as when I was a teacher, you get naughty kids from any background, and you can get kids from care who have come in with that obstacle in their way. Like I think it was Michelle that said, they come in with obstacles and they're already starting on the back foot in that race, and it's not fair and it needs to be stopped. So I have no problem in supporting the motion, and whilst it's great to be bombastic and stand on a soapbox and talk about it tonight, I implore everyone to do the same things in those committee meetings that they're going to advocate tonight. And like I say, credit where it's due. I know that the councillors in this room that regularly do, and it isn't easy, and you might rub people up the wrong way by doing it, but so what, because it's right. So thank you to Nova for bringing the motion, and just to add to everybody, say congratulations on the hard work that you've put in, and Children's Services where it deserves to be for the kids in our borough, giving them what they deserve at the standard that they deserve it at, and I'm proud of that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hattersley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Charlton for bringing this motion and continuously fighting for our young people in the borough. I wanted to start by saying people in work often say to me, Robin, do you have children of your own? And despite having no biological children, as a corporate parent, I have 488 children who rely on me and my colleagues in this room to do right by them and ensure that their life chances are not impacted by their experiences in care. However, currently, data surrounding the life experience of care experienced people show that we can be doing and should be doing a lot more. Research shows that young people who have lived in care between the ages of 10 and 17 are 5 times more likely to be excluded from school. then 37% of those care experienced young people do not continue on with education after 16, and then only 6% of those care experienced people go on to university. This is because of the barriers explained by Councillor Sweeney and Councillor Gomez-Asperon. They start school with those barriers to their learning, and those barriers continue and grow as they move on throughout their life. We need to ask ourselves, would you accept these educational disparities for your own biological children or family? And if the answer is no, we can be doing better. As we move into adult life, we see care experienced people make up 25% of those who are experiencing homelessness, and they continue to have difficulties finding safe and suitable housing throughout their adult life. This, again, isn't through any fault of their own. It's because when they start their life, they've got huge barriers, and they grow throughout their life. We need to consider these barriers that are placed upon care experienced people, and we must ask ourselves how we can begin to break down these barriers and support care experienced people from undergoing discrimination and the huge disparities throughout their life for experiences beyond their control. I know that Councillor Marcel mentioned how we can be doing more, and she's completely right. However, this motion today is looking at care experienced people, care experience becoming a protected characteristic. And I think by including care experience into the Equalities Act and as a protected characteristic, we can begin to break down those barriers faced by care experienced people. And we need to start by understanding the discrimination faced by these people and by having a zero tolerance policy to such discrimination before we can begin to start making larger and much needed changes. We need to ask ourselves again, would you accept such barriers for your own biological family? If the answer is no, we need to continue to fight for legislative changes and support this motion tonight. Care experienced people are valuable, useful and vibrant members of society, and we need to create a country that allows care leavers to succeed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hattersley. Do we have any further speakers or final speakers? No? Councillor Charlton, would you like to sum up your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would. Don't worry, I know you're all waiting for your tea, so it won't be long. But I just think I want to say thank you for everyone for the contribution this evening, because children and young people are our #1 priority in this council. And that's not, we don't just say that because it sounds good. We say that because we mean it. As a Labour group, as a cabinet, our staff, everybody strives to improve the lives of children and young people in this local authority, and the Ofsted judgment shows testament to that. We are a good and outstanding for our care leavers authority. That is no mean feat. That has been grit, determination and hard work by our staff and everyone involved, corporate parents. You know, we've all done it. So I do want to thank people here tonight. I've listened to a lot of what people have said, and people will be reassured that actually we do prioritise our young people as care leavers for housing. It's been very useful having Sue sitting here, because I've been double checking that's right. So, you know, all our care leavers, you know, do get priority housing. We do internships. We do try and, out through scrutiny, there's been papers come through about how we support our young people into work. So there's lots and lots of work going on. That said, we can do better and we can do more. And now I've got more time, I will be in Hillary's ear about all sorts of things and ideas that I've got. Councillor Marcel said about the adopting a granny. I've already got an idea about that, Linda, about how we can support our care leavers, because unfortunately tonight Charlie couldn't be here because she's got 2 young children and she didn't have anyone to look after those. So don't worry, we're talking about that, we're thinking about those ideas. So I just want to reassure people in here that that's what we are doing, and we will fight with our young people and for our young people. We will be an outstanding authority, I can assure you of that, because we've got the foundations right and we will get there. So ending on a positive note, and I would just like to thank everyone for the contribution.
Thank you, Councillor Charlton. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? I declare the motion carried. Thank you. That now concludes the council meeting. Thank you for your attendance.